Hey everybody, welcome to Keep It Real 3, Realistic Pet Portraits. So before we get started, I just wanted to thank you guys for buying the DVD, and I just want to make it clear that if you have this DVD, you really should have at least DVD 1 to give you the basics of my color blending and palette technique, because we're not going to show a lot of the palette. It's a very limited palette. And you're going to see that when I show the ink caps. I also don't go through the stenciling process in as much detail as I do on Keep It Real 1. So keep that in mind. This is for the more advanced student who's already had at least Keep It Real 1 or has had some experience doing this type of a color portrait. So what you're seeing me do now is just essentially clip out Daisy's head. Daisy's the name of our dog. Make a path with the pen tool, knock out the background, and now sampling with the eyedropper and just taking a solid paintbrush and putting down sampling of color in bands. I try to go across the ear, for example, and put from dark to light what the colors are in the ear. I'll do the same thing across the forehead, across the eye, across the cheek, across the nose, underneath, across the chest. Really the only thing I do differently now than on Keep It Real 1 is the color sampling, taking the eyedropper and making the little dots. It helps me pick ink a lot quicker. I used to do it by eye, but now I can kind of take these kind of families of colors and look at my ink set and pick out what's appropriate to match. And I eliminate a lot of the colors as well, because a lot of those colors are kind of in between colors that I don't necessarily need each individual shade of everything. I can kind of warm stuff up, cool it down, brighten it up, darken it down, as again you guys should know from Keep It Real 1. So this is really more of a companion to Keep It Real 1 than it is standalone, but it will stand alone if you're the type of tattoo artist who's already experimenting with color portraiture, color realism, whatever everybody's calling it right now. So anyway, here we go with the typical stenciling technique, and you'll see that I still do this the same way as well. Basically, I like to put a printout set to best plain paper out of the inkjet. I put it directly on top of the thermofax paper, press real hard with a very fine pen, and I'll get the transfer on the back, and then the transfer goes on the person, in this case on my lovely wife. So this is all outlined in Keep It Real 1 and in Keep It Real 2. You see me do the stencil. And by now, I remember when this was a big mystery, and but by now, everybody pretty much knows this process. So let's talk palette. You got a triple black, a couple of lining blacks, a power brown, a brown, which looks almost red, a crimson red, tangerine, a Georgia peach, a couple of almonds, a couple of white, dark ochre, light ochre. In the upper right, we've got like a light peach, and then caramel, and probably an undead skin or infected skin. One of those kind of bluish browns, a little more opaque than caramel. And this is my setup. 2 cups of water. I cover everything up. I'm liking the napkins instead of tearing paper towels. That was the Inkjet to Flight. I'm using Cheyenne Hawk cartridges, a Cheyenne Hawk handpiece, and True Grips from True Tubes as my grip cover, which is really important for me because I was getting some numbness in my fingers after tattooing for 20 years, and I found out that it was really just the hardness of a hard grip again, which I was using disposables for years, and it was just kind of pinching a nerve in my thumb. And these grips are phenomenal. They just alleviate all of that. And between the Flight and the grips and the cartridge system, it's just a delight to tattoo this way. No vibration, barely any fatigue at all. So anyway, as usual, we're going to start in the bottom right with a dark. And again, I'm going to keep referring to Keep It Real 1 because I really do consider this a companion to Keep It Real 1. I'm using a black, but the black probably also has some brown in it. I almost never just use black because black kind of turns out to be like a dead color if you don't give it a little juice with something else. So almost always adding, in the case of something like something earthy and neutral like this dog portrait, probably adding brown most of the time. And now here I am going into that kind of that more opaque brown, and still with some black in the tube, though not totally cleaning the tube out. So like I mentioned in Keep It Real 1, what I do when I do even a person, anything, I try to experiment with the value ranges and the temperature ranges down in the bust, like in the neck and in the chest, so that by the time I get to something important, like the cheek or the face or the nose or the forehead, something, in the meat of the tattoo, I've already kind of established what's working and what's not working down in the neck area, where it's easy to kind of fudge. Shh, don't tell my wife that I fudged. But, and here we go. I mean, really, I'm just tapping around to add opacity and to add a little bit of temperature as well. I'm trying to keep things kind of cool in the shadows on this and warm in the highlights. And also where it turns, see, that's that brown, and then I'm cutting into it with that almondy color. Where things turn from the darkest darks into the light, you'll see that's where I start to use those reds and that reddish brown, because I just like warmth on a turn, and I'm learning that from painting and from going to painting classes about putting warmth into where things turn away from the light, and it really adds something as far as dimension and depth. So, and I will say that I'm probably, for this tattoo, using a 13 Magnum curved. I would probably say I'm using I think the setup for this was a 13, a 9 curved, a 7 straight mag, and then probably a 5 liner and a 7 round shader. That's a nice 4 needle setup for me most of the time. Very similar to the size paintbrushes I would use for a painting like this. Now when I establish this chin line, I want to leave some negative spaces. Hopefully you could see that. Those negative spaces are going to be whiskers later on cutting through the shadow. If you don't leave the space now, you're not going to be able to erase it out later, folks. You should already know that. If you don't know you can't erase out, you shouldn't have bought this DVD. But, yeah, so this is me going in with white and probably the 5 liner. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking the white, and I'm going to do a few passes where the whiskers are, just so if I lose the stencil or what have you, I could work around and have that negative space still be there. Like, I'm not going for crazy full saturation on these whiskers right now. I just want to be able to see them. And by no means did I invent this technique. This is something, I think the first time I ever heard of this, it was one of my friends came back from a Tom Renshaw seminar years ago and said, oh yeah, man, talked about putting the whiskers in and working around them. And I know a lot of guys since have done the same thing. So here I am with that kind of almond color. And that's the thing with this piece. I really tried not to cut anything with white until the very top highlights and but brightest features. And also you'll notice that I always take my tattoos down about 20%, 15 to 20% darker than the photo, because tattoos usually heal about 10, 15% lighter, and I just feel like to get the longevity, you want to juice everything up. And what I mean by that is you want it to be a little more saturated, a little more contrasty, and a little more of a value range than might be in the photo. And that's another thing that I did in the photo, was mess with the exposure and enhance the photo. And I know I've been promising my Photoshop DVD forever, and it'll eventually come out. But what I might do is I may do a little tutorial on how to tweak references, and just put it up as a digital download for a very inexpensive, if not free, download for you guys. But everything you need to do this is absolutely covered in Keep It Real 1. Like I said, the only thing that's here that wasn't there is the eyedropper technique. And if you use Photoshop, you already know. You're going to take the eyedropper, you're going to sample a color, you're going to take a paintbrush, and you're going to blop it down. And then you see the little green marks on there, just when I probably took like a little paint pen or something when I was pulling my ink and just marked it off to make sure I had the colors I needed. So here I am using the same technique that I've been using forever since I started doing these type of tattoos. And what it is it's a brushing technique. And it's what I like to call a sweep. It's almost like, I think of it of like almost sweeping with a broom. Not this, this is actually going a little more diagonal, a little more sideways, because I'm trying to establish a little more saturated, sharp edge. But when I'm laying down color, I like to kind of go in a sweep. If I'm going to pack out, then I'll go back to my traditional circular motion. But really what I want you guys to pay attention to here is how it's a very limited palette, and I'm just pushing and pulling the temperature and the brightness and the darkness, and that's it. I mean, really, I don't even think I used every color I put out. This tattoo is very much like a limited palette painting technique. If you guys have ever heard of the technique where back before there were many colors, one of the limited palettes was like a Venetian red or an Indian red, black, white, and yellow ochre. And with those colors, actually the ability to kind of fool the eye into seeing blues and colors that aren't there. And it's really about what you put next to what, and how you heat things up, how you cool things down. So, and really all of this part of the face, like outside, is where you get a chance to play around and decide what colors am I going to use and how am I going to use them when I get into the gravy of this tattoo, which is the face. But I'm totally, like, now you can see I'm starting to tattoo a little faster. Once you see me start to speed up a little bit, that means I know what I want to do and I know how I want to do it. I'm getting realistic folds. I'm getting nice transitions, and I'm getting color harmony. It seems like the colors that I'm picking are working together. And part of color harmony in a piece this neutral is not cleaning your tube out too much. Leaving a little of that color in there when you go to the next color helps all the colors harmonize. One thing I would like to mention about mixing, which you won't see because I did not put the palette cam in this video deliberately, because I really wanted you guys to look more at what was happening in the tube. But just for the sake of something I've been asked, you shouldn't run your needles in the caps. So for example, let's say you wanted to make an orange and you had a cap of yellow out and you had a cap of red out, and you dipped into the red with your machine running, and then you dipped into the yellow while your machine was still running. you're really going to wind up with a crazy contaminated cap of yellow. It's going to be all but a light orange, a bright orange. When you're dipping from cap to cap, what you want to do is you want to dip with the machine not running quickly, like bloop, right in, right out, and then take the next color element, bloop, right in, right out. And then you're going to hit the power while you're holding the machine out of the caps, and you could literally look at the tip of the machine and watch the color blend. I don't do it much on this video, but I know I do it once or twice. If I can't see the color on the needles, obviously with the machine off, I'll tap the back of the glove and see what color I came up with, or I'll tap the skin again without the machine running and see what color I came up with, because the color in the tube is the color that's going to go into the person's skin. No ifs, ands, or buts. But that was just a little, don't run your, not only for the sake of needle tips, which is a whole other mantra of mine about keeping your needle tips checked and not letting them get dinged up and making sure you loop. I mean, I even loop these cartridges, and believe me, I throw plenty of them out. For the same reasons I, throw out manufactured needles, hooks and barbs and so on. Again, refer to Keep It Real 1 and, speak to whoever may be mentoring you as a tattoo artist. You should have your eye loop. You should know what to do with it. Again, if you own this video, that's something I shouldn't have to explain to you. But, yeah, so it's not just about keeping the needles from getting dinged up in the caps. It's about contaminating your ink and having to waste ink and put out usually additional light colors, like more whites, more yellows, any of your colors that you're using to lighten. Obviously, light colors are going to get contaminated quicker by dark colors. But if you just quickly dip with the machine off, I mean, I can dip into white with black, and the cap will still remain white as long as I didn't run the machine. So just something to keep in mind, a little, trick, technique. I don't know what you would call it, but it's been helpful for me to not make a mess and have to stop and put out new ink. I mean, face it, we want a tattoo. We want to be in the moment doing the tattoo. That's where we want to be. We don't want to be anywhere else. So I'm going to continue up, just blocking in shadows, not the darkest shadows, but structural shadows with this color, which is kind of like a muddied tan on the cooler side. It's probably brown and tan and maybe even tapped into the black to muddy it and cool it a bit. So it's really a repetitive process, just like you've seen in the other DVDs I've put out. Basically, I use that neck area to kind of establish what colors I'm going to use, and also, how I'm going to push the value ranges with those colors. And then it's just a matter of doing it, looking very closely at the photo reference, and also trying to convey the temperature changes. Where I see a temperature change in the photo, I'll push the color one way or the other. You could see the shadows tend to go cooler in this piece, and the highlights tend to be warmer, but not like intensely warmer. I definitely intensify the warmth of the turning of the planes and the highlights in the tattoo. The tattoo is warmer than the photo reference, but that's a personal choice, and I think it also just looks better on the skin as far as contrast without sacrificing too much dark stuff. And that's it. So you're gonna pretty much watch at this point. There's not a lot for me to say. If you're familiar with this type of stencil, I'm just looking at the stencil. My eyes are, constantly back and forth. Stencil, tattoo, and then, the color. Once it's mixed, I don't have to worry too much about the palette, which is another reason I'm not including the palette in this DVD, because I want you guys to start to become a little bit more I want you to be more self-reliant rather than thinking that you need 800 colors to get a tattoo correct, because that's not true at all. A limited palette, especially for something like an animal like this, is going to give you more than what you need. It's just a matter of light, dark, warm and cool, and reading the information in the photo, and making it happen, making a good stencil with good information that you can utilize. So I'm going to step back here, let you guys just watch for a little bit, and when I get to another key element, I'll come back and speak some more. Let me just see what we do here before I step out. So I'm trying to leave a lot of real time in here too, so that's why you're seeing all the pauses. See, the reason it was a pause is I needed to rinse out the machine. I was picking color. Now I'm putting the lighter mid-tone in there. It's not quite as bright as it looks when it first hit the skin. There it is. That's a good shot. So you see, it's not the lightest possible light. It's got some of that color that I was just using in it, and then I'm cutting it up with probably a bone or an ivory color, not white, and definitely not ochre, or there would be a lot more of a yellowness to it. It's still real tan and neutral. It doesn't have a lot of saturation. So a lot of neutrals in this piece. It's definitely kind of an exercise in neutrals. And with neutrals, again, like the strength is going to be warming them up and cooling them down, warming them up and cooling them down. You know, if you do a piece in grays, you could really say a lot with how you warm the grays up and cool the grays down. You know, if it were a painting, let's say. You could do the same thing with color. When you're working in something that's kind of natural, you could warm it up, cool it down. I'm putting a little texture in here by using the Magnum sharply sideways, just to kind of get that fur texture. Just to give it a little more of a flow, like you could see the direction of the hair. And you see it's the tips of the needles. I'm not really burying it, because you don't want to overwork it. And then when I need to fill an area with that color, you'll see the machine go back to that circular motion. So really look at the motions that are being used to achieve the different effects, because that's really what it's all about. You have to translate those hand motions. When it comes to technically applying the tattoo, it's really a lot of hand motion and knowing what hand motion is going to give you what effect, and getting a good application that's going to last 15 or 20 years in the tattoo. Back into some darks, not the darkest darks, but some darks. And I dipped it to some water before I put it down, not to make a wash out of it, but just to keep the ink fluid. It helps it to flow, without a doubt. A little tap in your water cup. Not a swish, not a dunk, just literally a tap of the tip of the tube to keep things moving. And you'll know what colors, too, you need to do it with. Those colors that kind of tend to be thicker are going to definitely work better with a little bit of water to kind of bust them out, get them to spread and disperse, I guess is the right word. But it's just flow. It's just getting it to flow. Thicker inks seem to come off the needles easier if they've got a touch of water on them. But if you have my first DVD, I spoke about literally doing washes in your early color portrait style tattoos, because then you could always go back and darken everything. So it was a learning tool. That's not what I'm talking about here. Here I'm talking about literally just adding some wetness to the ink to get the ink to move. If it's a little thick in the cap or a little thick on the needles, and it's just a touch of the top of the surface of the water. So the ink is still full strength. It doesn't heal light or anything, or washy. All right, so this is going to get real repetitive now. I'm going to step away from the microphone and put on a little music, which I don't normally do, but I'll be back in a moment. So enjoy. The only thing I would say about these areas is you'll see that I'm leaving the negative spaces for the whiskers, very important. And I'll also be taking white with the 7-round shader, or an even thicker liner, and you'll see me go in and actually put whiskers in ahead of time, like I did earlier. And that's the tattoo around the negative spaces, and then later on come back and strengthen those later on. So here you see me, I'm going in with a liner just so I can get some edges. And that's really the purpose of rounds for me, for the most part, is edges. So I want to put in, not necessarily lines, but what's going to have a hard edge. And I try to define that here. this looks like it's probably a 7 shader, and I'm just marking in kind of the bottom edge of the shadow and the bottom edge of the chin, leaving negative spaces where I may want whiskers to break through later. Also, I'm hitting the water with this ink as well, kind of mixing up the dark. It's not black, it's that brown with the it's kind of a little brown, tan, black, and then a little water. And sorry the camera jerks back and forth once in a while. I actually realized I think I was hitting it with either my foot or my elbow, or the chair was hitting it. So we try to avoid that with the editing in the video. So once in a while, I guess it's better than having my head in the way or whatever. And that's it. Now I'm dropping in some just little graphic reminders for myself about where the hair follicles for the whiskers are going to be. I'm just kind of looking at the photo while I have the liner out, saying, all right, where do I need to give myself kind of an edge reminder? So I'm putting one in over there where you see the cheek kind of breaks into the body. You know, the cheek is that way in the front, it's darker, and then the body is slightly lighter. It even catches a little bit of almost a halo at the edge. And now I'm back to the Magnum again, just working in the light mids to lights, but not highlights. So that bottom right area becomes the proving ground for all the color and technique that I'm going to use throughout the tattoo. That's where I'm going to test theories on, you know, what colors are going to work, what colors aren't going to work, what transitions between colors are going to work. A lot of this is on the first DVD, and this is just, you know, showing you that you can apply this to an animal. It doesn't have to be a person. These techniques are going to translate really into any photo referenced project. You're going to need that kind of topographical roadmap of a stencil. You're going to need to do a little bit of eyeballing as far as your color palette, or you could use the advantages of having Photoshop, sampling a bit of a digital palette, putting out your nearest neighboring inks that you own to those colors, and even mixing transition colors as you go, or you could even mix them in the cap if you had to. You could take let's say you're not very confident about a middle color you're seeing me use here that I'm using by cross dipping. Well, you could always fill a cap with the dark color, and then put a blank cap in the middle and fill a cap with a light color, and then put a little of the dark color in the center cap, fill it the rest of the way with the light color, and whip it together with the back of a sterile needle. Use the loop of the needle to spin it, you know, and make a mix. You know, I find the least experienced you are, and this was the case with me, and that's the only reason I don't feel uncomfortable saying it, because I lived it, is I think the least experienced you are, the more colors you need out to kind of pull something off. This is really like, maybe it's a horrible generalization, but in certain circumstances, I think the more colors you put out to pull something off, it just implies that you have less experience with kind of mixing color on the fly and knowing how much you can really accomplish with less color, less raw color and mixing color. If you study any painting, which I suggest you all do, there are a lot of old master paintings that are, you know, 4 color. And I don't mean CMYK like your inkjet printer at home. I mean, you know, a yellow ochre, Indian red, black, and white. And to do fully rendered, you know, religious iconography or whatever kind of scenes they were called upon to render. And you could swear you were seeing blues and greens, colors that didn't exist. And it's all how to control neighboring color relationships that a gray that you make, let's say, with an ivory black and a titanium white, is going to look blue if it's next to a warm color. And you could try that, you could try that by, just mixing up some acrylic paints. And one of my paintings, if you guys are like fans that have actually, been on my Facebook or Instagram or seen my portfolio, I did a painting of a human skull. It's very earth toned a while back, and it's been a popular image for me, so I've been really grateful that you guys like the image. But that's 4 colors. That painting was all done with four colors. Pardon me. It was yellow ochre, Indian red, titanium white, and ivory black. And it's, believe me, it's nothing I invented. It was something I read in a book or heard in a color theory seminar, and said, "Wow, I really want to try and see how much I could do with those 4 colors." And I suggest you guys experiment with that. You could really do some cool stuff, and your paintings will have harmony like out of the gate. The less colors you use in some circumstances, because you're kind of forced into, I don't know if I've said it already in this DVD, but I know I've said it in others, putting some of the last color into the next color. Like if there's a little bit of all your colors in every other color, that's one way of achieving harmony. I mean, it's another way of achieving mud, so you've got to do it with some type of control. But that is one way of achieving harmony in a piece. So here I am with a bigger mag, probably a 13, it looks like. And I'm using it on its edge to create an edge. So I'm looking to cut in the lip line, which is, in this case, I'm definitely using black. But it's probably also dipped into brown, just to give it a little more oomph. So about what I work with and how I tattoo. So I'm using A&D ointment. I like a lot of the products that are on the market, but the reason I use A&D during a tattoo like this, a portrait style tattoo especially, is I find that the other products deteriorate the stencil faster for me than A&D. And I've tried them all, so I won't bother naming them, but during this type of tattoo, I find that A&D retains the stencil longer for me, and that's with using stencil stuff as my stencil applicator, and prepping the skin with alcohol ahead of time, stripping most of the body oils away. I find that A&D gives me the longer lasting stencil. Whereas some of the other, combination aftercare tattoo along with products are great for healing the tattoo and for shorter, and for shorter duration tattoos. I think I still, though, hold the record. A little sidebar. I think I still hold the record for least amount of my head in the shot in DVDs, so. I'm pausing for everyone's applause, so I hope you're all clapping right now. But the ointment situation. So yeah, A&D during the tattoo. I've used a lot of other products. I like them. They all have their merits. Currently doing a trial run with a Redemption product from Afterlife, I guess. Redemption. Let me get it right. Plug the guy's product and get it wrong. Afterlife Redemption Aftercare. So anyway, it's one of the organic tattoo ointments, and I find that it doesn't eat the stencil, which is nice. But the added bonus, I'm not using it on this tattoo, but the added bonus I've noticed in the 2 or 3 months I've used it is that I don't get as much cross-contamination of color on the skin And what I mean by that is we've all had that experience where you do like a yellow area or a white area or a brightly colored area, and then you, oh man, I forgot this line or this black area. You put the black in, you wipe it, you accidentally wipe across your bright area, and now you've stained the surface of your light area, and then the area, you got to wait for it to heal out for you to get a good picture. You know, it's not going to stay stained, but it's a real pain in the butt when it comes to getting a good shot for your portfolio. And if the person's traveled in, kind of sucks because you might not see them. So I would definitely say that Afterlife product is the first one I've used that really puts kind of a nice, almost waxy coating on the tattoo that prevents the cross contamination of the surface. So as a tattoo artist, that's huge. I think that's a big benefit. So once again, here with the liner, this liner looks a little, this doesn't look like the 7 shader. This does look like a liner. It's probably a type 5 or a type 7. Again, going in with, not straight black, probably some diluted pigment, probably black, brown, and a little water or whatever. Just putting in the things that will have a hard edge, that will be linear, so to speak. The nose and the lip line. Here I probably added a little bone. Again, I'm using that bone color to lighten things up right now, not white, because I don't want to go to the top of my value scale till the very end of the tattoo. And this is my wife. She's got excellent skin. I've done quite a bit of work on her that you guys have probably seen, but it's very light, so she takes color great and it shows up great. But her skin also, it's not dry. It's very healthy skin. So that's the other thing, is I find that dry skin holds a stencil better than moisturized or oily skin, for obvious reasons. So if I see that she's losing a key part of the stencil, that's when you'll see me bust out the liner and be like, oh, okay, listen, I should just scratch this in case it disappears. But when I do those things, I'm not doing them for any kind of permanence. I'm doing them just so they won't be lost. So it's pretty much committing the stencil, but I won't use in this type of piece, I won't use a gray wash line or a blood line, but I'll actually use the color of what the object's going to be, or the neighboring color of what's going to be inside or outside of the edge, if that makes sense. So it's color. It's a colored line. It's never just dirty water or blood line for a color piece. There's plenty of times I use both of those things, but not for realistic tattooing. 90% of the time, I would say it's colored line, and optimally, you just want the stencil to last, so you don't have to do any kind of you don't want to break the skin ever unless you need to. So if you could get that stencil and that person, and that perfect magical combination where the stencil stays on for 6 hours, awesome, because that's the ideal situation. That's the one you want, because then you're not bloodlining, you're not scratching, you're not color lining, you're just able to work over the stencil, which is harmless and temporary and isn't making a permanent mark on the person, the stencil, and then your finished piece is your finished piece. It's not relying on any scratches or bloodlines or whatever. Again, this is the way I do stuff. I've seen guys bloodline the heck out of stuff and it comes out great, and this is just the Keith way. This is the way I do this piece. The other DVDs are the way I did those pieces. And you'll see, if you have all three, that I've made some changes, equipment-wise and such. But for the most part, I tattoo the same. And I was lucky enough to be brought into tattooing and given good fundamentals. I tattooed a lot of flash and had to really apply a lot of tattoos before I tried any advanced techniques like these. And I recommend you guys do the same. I know it's very tempting. A lot of new tattooers are coming right in, going right into portrait work to kind of get people's approval and be validated. But, you know, a lot of those pieces that you're seeing on the internet, again, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or name any names. They look great in the picture, and then you run into some people on the street who have the pieces, and the pieces haven't healed very well. That's just a lack of experience in application. That's not being a bad artist, because a lot of these people are just tremendous artists who haven't been tattooing long enough to see what their tattoos look like 5 years later, 10 years later, even 20 years now later. And that's the thing, man. You're going to change your approach as you see your tattoos age and come back, because that's part of being a tattoo artist and being an artist that's chosen this medium. I mean, I think everybody goes through that cycle. Put black in it. Oh, don't put any black in it. Put too much black in it. Don't put enough black in it. You know, and then you see those pieces, and you know, you're gonna decide on your own. You know, what works for you stylistically, but you know that it's not all style when it comes to a tattoo. If you want to just go all style and be 100% stylistic and be able to make any choice you want to make, well, you know, get a paintbrush and get canvases and paints and paint, because there's certain things in a tattoo that'll look good the day you do it and not look good 5 years later. And I'm putting way more darks in my tattoos now, making them darker, just, you know, for that reason. Seeing tattoos now in the 5th, 6th year, thank God not a lot, just a couple that were light, and going dark. But yeah, going darker. And definitely I still subscribe to the tattoos are gonna get 15 to 20% lighter, so do them, you know, 15% darker. When you are confident and you know what you're tattooing, you know, juice it up, make it darker, make it richer, make it more saturated, because there's going to be that best case scenario. You're going to have a well-healed tattoo that maybe somebody's not a big fan of moisturizer. It's going to have an ashy layer of dead skin over it that's making it look 5% lighter, you know, or you're going to have that wear and tear of the sun, you know, deodorant, soaps, and all the things that really rob our skin of moisture and health. And you know, the rule of thumb for me has always been, what's good for your skin is good for a tattoo, and what's bad for your skin is bad for a tattoo. And that's it, because you know, your skin is where the tattoo's got to live. You know, that pigment, once it's trapped in there, you know, that's its home. That's where it's going to hang. And you want to give it a healthy place to live. So I encourage moisturizer, and if you get, you know, a dead layer of skin on there, some exfoliating never hurt. Scary words to men, I guess, but you know, embrace your feminine side and moisturize your arms, you dummies. But well, come by here and I'll moisturize it for you. Anyway, sorry, getting crazy. That wasn't a gay voice, by the way. That was a guy who likes to moisturize other guys' voice, so I don't want any emails. Anywho, back to the tattoo. Back to the tattoo. So this is just taking, like, if you notice, like I'm using that muscle in the cheek as kind of a keystone to work away from. So now that I've kind of gotten it established, I'm looking up to the left at the portrait printout, and then doing the tattoo, and I'm using that as my kind of landmark, and I'm kind of growing everything out from that point. I mean, even that little bit of dark I put in under the eye, it's just to test, like, how dark am I going to go here? Because when I squint and look at the photo, that color, that area, is one of the darkest areas in the whole tattoo, and I like to kind of put that in now just to see like how dark is the darkest dark, because that's going to tell me how dark I could push everything else. And like I was saying, the importance of contrast and giving it a little extra juice, a little extra saturation for the sake of longevity. It really revolves more around the values than the color. So you need to know what value scale you're working in. If that's going to be the darkest dark, well, that's going to tell me how dark I could push the mids, and so on. So these are not beginner concepts. They're a little, I would say, intermediate to advanced. So this is definitely a companion to the first DVD, which really does have more of the basics. And a lot of what we're talking about here is just straight up art skill and art technique and art theory. So I would love to see you guys and girls go to your local art students league or art collective. If you're here in New York, there's a great organization called the Teaching Studios, run by Rob Zeller. They have a location in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and in Oyster Bay, Long Island. But I'm sure in your hometown, if you do a web search for like Atelier or Art Students League or even just art school, I'm not saying, sign up and go for a bachelor's degree or whatever. I mean, if you have the luxury to do that'd be awesome. I mean, I wish at times I would have been able to do that in my life, but I'm talking about you can go life draw. Some places you can go life draw anywhere from $5 to $20 for an entire day, and that money is really just used to pay the model. They're entitled to be paid. And you can take workshops in a lot of places that can range anywhere from a day to 5 days, and in price can range anywhere from $150 to, let's say, $500. But I mean, you get the opportunity to learn from an awesome instructor in most cases, who's going to take you to places that you've not been artistically, just if you're limited to just tattooing, and all of it translates and comes back. I'm putting the edges on the eyes again with the, I'm going to say Type 7 from Cheyenne, a washy black, not quite black, definitely washed out. But yeah, hit up art school, man. I mean, I'm a guy who loves self-education. I have a lot of books, a lot of DVDs. I visit a lot of websites. But ultimately, the best, I mean, all those things are great. Again, here, just sketching in landmarks. I don't want you guys to miss out on what I'm doing here. But there's nothing like getting in a room with other artists who are all sweating to do a good job, and there's that collective energy. If you've even just been to some tattooing seminars, but when it's hands-on and it's like you're not just sitting there taking notes and everybody's there and they've all got to turn out a piece or whatever, it's like, oh man, it's such a great experience, because art is such a solitary pursuit. I mean, we're usually alone in our studios, pursuing art. Tattooing, thank God, is more social. I think it's one of the reasons I still love it after 20, 21 years of doing it. It's because I like people. So it's one of the few hardcore art fields where you need at least one other person to be successful at it. So all right, I'm in with the 7 now, and what I'm doing is I'm using varying degrees of black and black wash, just depending on what I'm 100% positive is going to be permanent, and what's just a sketch for work later on. So the inner details are sketchy, but I'm starting to establish the outer edging of the eye socket, which in this dog is very bold and black, and most of them, most dogs have very bold black flesh around their eyes and around their mouth. If you notice, a lot of dogs have very blackish flesh around the lips. And now I'm going in with the stronger black and making more definite decisions about those earlier lines. I'm thickening them up on one side so that I can get in there with the Magnum and have a nice edge. Some people do it in reverse. Some people will go in with the Magnum and then take the liner at the end and put the edge on. I mean, it's a push and pull. Sometimes I'll do one, sometimes I'll do the other. Sometimes I'll do one, do the other, and then have to go back one more time with the round. I mean, ultimately, do what you got to do to make it as good as you can make it, because that's it. That's what it's about. You're not in a race with these kind of tattoos. This is not, hey, I got to get this done because somebody's sitting on a bench outside waiting to be next. I mean, you can't approach tattoos as art with that kind of stress. I mean, these kind of fine art, for lack of a better description, fine art tattoos, I like to have the environment very controlled, no one around. You know, the shop is open, but it's a quiet, appointment-based shop. There's some music on or a movie on, nothing too loud, nothing too crazy. As often as I can, I have the customer laying down, fully laying down, even with arms. I tattoo people laying down because I find that it helps them relax. And a lot of times, between the rotary machines and the, you know, kind of keeping a peaceful environment and there's not a lot of noise and distraction, a lot of my customers fall asleep. So it's, yeah, that's the guy I want to be known as. I mean, let them go tell all their friends that, hey, I fell asleep while this guy tattooed me. You know, I don't want to be the guy that they go around saying, oh my God, it was like he was ripping my arm off. So, you know, it's good. It's good to be known as the painless dentist, right? Everybody's going to come to you. But believe me, I'm not tattooing these people any less intensely. It's just a matter of atmosphere. And the coils are very quiet. You know, these, pardon me, the rotaries are very quiet. So something like the Hawk or the Flight here that I'm using, so many great rotaries on the market. I love the cartridge system. I can't get away from it. They're virtually silent. And I find that customers find it very pleasing, very relaxing that they don't have the buzzing of the machine. I'm not using it 100% for that reason, trust me. I mean, I'm using what's comfortable for me and what helps me get my job done. But it's a nice bonus to know that it makes the customers feel better about their experience. So here's a very key thing. I'm coming out of the darks with a very warm brown. And again, that's something I learned from painting. You know, when you're turning an edge out of the shadow into the light, that's usually in an object where you're going to see the most saturated color, which for those of you who don't know what saturation is, it's like it's going to be the most colorful color. Does that make sense? I mean, that's a pretty saturated reddish brown, whereas everything down in the cheek area is a very desaturated or grayed down, for lack of a better description, tan or brown. So when you're turning out of the dark shadow of a plane, usually what's, you know, on the edge of the darkest shadow is a very saturated color. And in a case where the shadows are cool, usually it's turning out into a warm saturation and then into the light. So, and I'm exaggerating it. You know, you'll see a little of that redness up in the photo, but it's not that red. But it is that red in the tattoo, because when the tattoo is healed, it's going to lose a little of that intensity, but not so much that it won't give me a nice, strong, intense area that's going to, like I said, last. You want 10, 15 years out of your tattoos. You know, when I was doing Flash, and none of this stuff was even being done, it was, you know, it was all about, hey, your job is to duplicate this unicorn or whatever it was, and make sure the guy or girl is going to get 15 years out of it. I don't want to see them come in for a touch-up on this tattoo for 15 years. Let them come in for, you know, 20 more tattoos, but they should never point to this and be like, hey, isn't this fading out? You know, shouldn't be fading out. If you're doing it right, it shouldn't be fading out prematurely. So again, working the darks. Just now I'm still in that kind of, if you broke the face into 4 parts, I'm still in that lower right quadrant technically, even though I'm up at the eye, and I'm just working the darks. This motion is that sweeping motion, which I find with rotary machines gives you the nicest kind of feathering. It gives you a nice solid starting point and then a nice fade from that point that you can then pull your next color into. Whereas with, I don't know, with coils, I guess I would tend to do that more with circles. So there's definitely a difference. There's hand motion differences when it comes to coils and rotaries. They're subtle though, because you know, then there's motions that work the same too, but and that's an action right there that I've seen so many great tattooers do, and I remember when I started doing it, I didn't even know why I was doing it, other than I saw Bob Tyrell do that, and I saw this person do that, and I saw that person do that, and I started doing it. And at first I was like, I don't know, you know, it doesn't, nothing's happening, nothing's going in. Why am I doing this kind of touchdown liftoff technique? You know, how are these guys getting great tattoos out of this, and I'm getting like nothing? Well, the fact of the matter is, what it does is it allows you to do a very gentle build and not max out the skin. And it's what's going to enable you, whether you're working in color or in black and gray, to put in more passes and, you know, blend into previous passes. Because what you're doing when you're doing that, just kind of, not this motion here, but the other one that was kind of more like, it almost looks like lightly sweeping with the broom. You're putting pigment in, but you're putting it in at a lower saturation, you know? I mean, if you picture the tattoo machine just makes dots, and if you make small, slow circles, you're putting in, let's say, 100% of the dots. If you do the sweepy motion, well, now you're only putting in like 30% of the dots, which means you could put 30% of the dots in that black, and then 30% of the dots in a slightly lighter brown, and then come back now and put 30% of the dots in with the mid-tone. Well, now you get this blend that almost looks, you know, airbrushy or chalky or whatever you want to call it. It's got that soft blend. Well, the soft blend is just allowing a little skin to survive those first passes. Because if you go full, you know, balls out with your first pass of whatever color it may be, and you go back into it again, like I was saying earlier, it's going to possibly look good and not even look damaged the day you do it and take the photo. But believe me, when you see that person in a few weeks, that area is going to be a cookie of a scab, or it will have scabbed already and fallen out, and you'll just see skin there, and it'll be ugly pink skin that needs a little more time to heal before you can go in and fix it. So just try not to max things out unless you're 100% sure what's going there. And, you know, it is what it is. You're not going to want to blend over it. And, you know, this is for single session stuff. With most portraits, I like to do 2 sessions just so I could put another eye on it. You know, in the future, I'm going to do something more on 2 and multiple session tattoos that has nothing to do with portraits. It'll be more about my kind of illustrative or fantasy work or whatever you want to call it. I'm pretty much done with the portrait genre of educational videos, because it's like there's nothing else to tell you guys. Really, it's all hard work now for you and for me. But there are a lot of great techniques that have emerged in the last 10 years that really rely on a multiple session tattoo. I mean, you could actually do glazing in tattoos now. And what I mean by that is you could put down a series of color, let the person heal, and then put translucent color over it, and you've essentially glazed it as if you put a translucent layer of oil paint over a dried layer of oil paint. Sounds crazy? It's true. If you want to see a really cool example of that, by the way, you could pick up the Nick Baxter oil painting book. And to me, man, there's a photo in that book that's like worth the cost of the book, where he shows you 3 sessions of a biomech tattoo, and you just see how he builds the layers over the course of 3 sessions, just like a painting. And I believe he says in the book how, once he got serious about painting, he started to borrow painting techniques and put them into his tattoo work, which is evident when you see Nick's work. It's very, very illustrative, and well, I guess the right word would be illustrious and painterly and just impressive, and breakthrough on many levels. And that technique specifically hit me like, wow, I love to do this when I paint. I love to glaze transparency when I paint. And obviously, because he's a very experienced artist, he knew, like, I can't do this. And if I were to do these 3 things, these 3 stages in one session, I would pretty much just max the skin out and traumatize the skin so bad that none of it would take. But breaking it into 3 sessions, and Guy Aitchison, again, another guy, no pun intended, who is a pioneer in that type of tattooing as well. If you look at initial Guy sessions, they can look downright scary. And I'm a huge Guy fan, so I know he won't take that as an insult. But it's because he's laying a foundation that if you're a single pass tattoo artist, you don't even understand what he's doing. But if you're a painter, you might understand a little more well what he's doing. And then when you see the finished pieces, it's just like there's no mistaking one of Guy's pieces and the effects he's able to attain. It's just incredible, If there's ever going to be a Mount Rushmore of tattooing, and Guy's not one of the heads chiseled into the mountain there, I don't know what went wrong, because the techniques that a lot of us are using today, even though Guy's not known for doing portrait work, a lot of it stems from the bravery and exploration of artists like Guy Aitchison, and then later on to Nick Baxter, and so many guys that I don't even want to start mentioning. A lot of it was going on in Europe early on when I started, but wasn't going on here in the United States. That was back in like 92, 93. But anyhow, it seems like now all you see is people attempting portraits, and I don't have anything against that, but one of my pet peeves about the tattoo industry is guys who can paint, guys and girls who can tattoo portraits, and then if you ask them, hey, draw me an army soldier climbing a hill, mounting a flag or something. If they can't find that picture on Google, they're screwed, because they can't draw. All they can do is reproduce. Well, you need to consider that. I mean, to be limited to portraiture, fine, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But I don't know, I always found it more interesting to work from my imagination, and that's why I admire a lot of the biomech artists, even though I personally don't delve too deeply into it. I'm going to start doing more. I've done a couple to really good reaction, So I'm thinking I may do more. My stuff always tends to be character driven. So if I'm going to do biomech, it's going to have that almost like early guy, and then some kind of almost like Dan Hazelton, or where you're going to see things in it. There's literally going to be faces or skulls or monsters or women or whatever. It's hard for me to just explore the landscape of biomechanical, but I definitely want to try more. So anyway, you see I really went in and established the edges around the eyes. So that's all set. And now I'm going in and I'm sculpting out the planes of the top of the head nearest the ear. Again, making everything darker. That I deliberately went darker there on the back, towards the back of the head, because I knew it was going to drop off into her skin until we decide what kind of background work we're going to do. And the background would probably be light anyway, because we're talking about doing like the dog's name is Daisy. We're talking about doing daisies and maybe some bees, because she's got some bees lower down on the leg. So I'm assuming it's going to be kind of daylight. So I want to have darks to pop my lights up against. And also I wanted to achieve that effect we were looking at earlier, where the edge of the head is actually dark and then it drops off and there's almost a lightness, and then you see the shoulder, the dog's shoulder. So I pushed that edge, of that top edge of the head darker. It's kind of out of the shot here. The photo paper version is out of the shot, but you could see there's kind of dark color along the right edge of the face if you look up in the left-hand corner of your screen at the photo paper printout. Same process as the neck. I went in with my dark color, and now I'm pulling my middle color into it. And my motions now are more circular, almost like long ovals that are close together, because I know what I want there. There's no guesswork. I know what I want. That color is what I want. I'm going to saturate it nearly 100%. With the exception of the leading edge where I have to pull a new color into it. So here we go, moving right along. What's next? All right, and now again the mid-tone. I'm gonna go into the warm color rolling out, where its edge is feathered, and I'm gonna go into that edge with the mid-tone tan to kind of get that transition complete. And if you notice here, it's a little more yellow, so I definitely probably a little of the light ochre and the bone to have warmth again, where things get high and closer to the camera, closer to the viewer's eye. I want a little more warmth. So what that means in terms of coming out of shadows would be redder, and what that means in terms of coming into highlight would be more yellow or golden. So I'm just watching along with you guys at this point. All right. If I sniffle here and there, I'm just getting over a cold, so I apologize. Okay, so here working some more darks around the eyes. And the eyes are very dark and very inset. I mean, if you squint them down, it's almost like the sockets go black. I'm not going to do that because, people are always going to... If an object has eyes, this is another thing I was taught, not only in tattooing, but just in art in general when I used to draw, comics and fantasy art and stuff. If something has eyes, that's where people are going to look. They're going to look at the thing in the eyes first. And then they'll usually travel around and look at everything else. But the eyes are key, man. You've got to trick out the eyes and get people to just be like, wow. Because it's all about those eyes. If they look and they see like soulful eyes, that's going to win them over. And even the client, like, when I tattoo portraits of people or dogs or whatever on clients, it's when you do the eye and you're at the very end and you put in that white, it's like ting, and they see that spark of life. It's coming from the eye, it's not coming from the nose, it's not coming from the ear, it's coming from the eye. So I like to take what's in the photo and enhance it, and in this case the eyes are deep set under her brow, which is prominent. French bulldogs have a pretty prominent brow, just like English bulldogs. So her eyes fell into shadow quite a bit. So what I'm going to do in this case is just warm, again, in the dark, something's going to pop out of the cool dark if it's warmer and lighter. So you'll see I'm going to actually make it warmer than it is in the photo. I'm going to make it lighter than it is in the photo. It's still going to resemble the dog. I'm not killing any resemblance, but it's going to enhance that eye. It's going to give that eye the pop to make it kind of peek out of the socket and give us that kind of warm, soulful, I'm looking back at you kind of vibe. And general eye formula depending on the lighting, but if your lighting's coming from anywhere above, you want to go darker on the top, lighter on the bottom. Because what's happening is the light is hitting the eye like a cup. Like, picture a teacup, tilt the cup towards your face, you're looking into the open cup. Now, if you were to shine a light at an angle down at the cup itself is casting a shadow into itself, and then the bottom part of the cup is catching the light. That's an eye. Just because the eye has that clear cornea, I believe, cornea over it, the lens of the eye comes out, in the opposite direction of the cup. The lighting is happening because of the inward direction of the cup shape of the interior of the eye. The interior of the eye is actually a cup type of shape. It's like it's scooped in, it's not bulged out. It's that lens that bulges out on the outside. So that's why the shadow in the top and the highlight in the bottom, because it's actually like a dome or a cup shape catching the light. Now the lights, the highlights, those two little spots I'm leaving open for white later, would be called reflective or specular highlights. The reason they're on the top and they're kind of almost curving out is because they are reflecting reflections on that clear cornea that's bulging in the other direction. So for it's actually the opposite. The highlight catches on the top because the top is bulging outward and catching the light, and it wouldn't have a highlight on the bottom because it's curving back in. And there you go. I mean, you could already see kind of there's no color in the bottom of the eye, but you can see how I'm setting it up to have like a glow, an inner glow that makes sense with the light source. Well, the stencil's holding up real good. I'm giving it a pretty good wipe. And at this point in any given portrait, I'm feeling pretty good. I've established how I'm going to handle the colors, the warms, the cools, the lights, the darks. I've got an eye in there, and I've got, the nose and mouth mapped out. I mean, I feel good about, hey, no matter what happens, unless something goes horribly, terribly wrong, I've nailed what I need to nail down to know that this will be this dog. In this case, my dog, Daisy. I know I have the resemblance. So unless I do something horrible with the head shape or the opposing eye, there's not much I could do to take away the resemblance. The other thing is, remember back in the day, people used to put the photo next to the portrait in their portfolio. And then later on, as portraiture became popular, especially color portraiture, you notice very rarely do the artists put the picture next to the portrait. Well, I could tell you, the reason they're not doing that is because a lot of times you would be stunned at how different the photo is from the tattoo. And I don't mean the resemblance. The resemblance is tight, you know what I mean? It's on the money. But it's the pushing of the color and the saturation and making hyper-realistic things like this eye that's not really what it looks like in the picture, but it's again something that you'll hear if you go to an art school or read some good books on classical painting technique. It's about combining what you see and what you know to be true. So all those facts earlier about the structure of the eye are things I know to be true about an eye. So even though they're not represented in this photo very well, I have enough knowledge about the eye to combine what I'm seeing with what I know to give me what's best for the art, for the image. And to me, that's where I'm at with my portraiture now, where I was more of a slave to the photo 7 or 8 years ago. Now I use the photo, and at a certain point, I won't say I abandon the photo, but at a certain point, I don't slave to the photo anymore. Now it's like, the piece is my piece. It's supposed to look like a painting. It's supposed to look like a rendering, pastels or charcoal or what have you. What you saw right there, just to clear this up, the machine is not running when I touch the back of my glove, because that would be stupid. But sometimes I can't see the color I've mixed in the tube. And if you touch the tube to the back of your glove, you'll see the color you've mixed, because the color on my hand is the color that's going in. I don't do it often, obviously, or my glove would be covered with color, but there must have been something about that given moment where I could not see the color clearly in the tip of the tube, so I needed to tap it out and see it. So that's what that was about. And no, the machine was not running. You don't run your machine on your hand. Don't run the machine and stick it in your eye or swirl it around in your nose either, so just so you guys know. So like I said, warmth. Adding warmth. Still dark though. Dark and warm. But the warmth is what's making it proceed instead of recede. And once I get to a certain point here, I'm going to put the music back on, because a lot of it is going to be repetitive. But I will stick with you through the rendering of the eye. That's black and probably like a heavy brown, like a dark brown or power brown, or I forget what Eternal calls it. I think it's power brown or dark brown with a little black in it. And as far as black, I have two blacks out. I have the triple black, which I use for things that will be absolutely black and not lined, so black areas, and then lining black, which is a little bit more fluid, a little easier to use to mix, and obviously if I'm going to line, I'm going to use lining black because it flows off the needles better. But for, intense darks and darkening color, I like to use the triple black because it's more of a, like a pigment black. Whereas I guess, these are just guesses, but I guess the liner black is probably more of like a carbon black. It's more inky, like, drawing ink used to be. for tattooing. Whereas the triple is more of just like, it's almost like the other colors. It's kind of more of a pigmented black. So great for when you want like something real black. But if you line with it, you're going to make a blown out nightmare because it's really not meant to hold a line. So I'm looking at the photo, which is out of frame right now, but that's okay. And I'm just putting the breaking edge of the eye socket has a little light spot. I'm probably exaggerating it, making it even more light, and using warmth again. So everything up and in and around that socket has a reddish, warm feel. It's very comfortable. It's very warm. Whereas once you drop off into the cheek, everything gets cooler and more neutral. So, I mean, the colored conversation in this DVD is way more like a painting class than a tattoo DVD, and I'm not going to apologize for that because really I wanted to present the information in a different way than I did on the first color DVD, the Andre the Giant portrait DVD, which I couldn't stress enough. You should have that or something similar from another artist before viewing this DVD, because really this is for someone who's done some and is just looking to fine-tune animal portraits. And then here again, whenever I see the opportunity where it's not going to be overbearing, I try to just lightly make directional moves to imply the direction of the fur and the way it's growing. Cool. That's my doggy. A little bit of an even redder brown. This might be the eternal brown, like when you just buy the bottle it says brown on it. Now it's funny when you look at it next to all of these altered, more neutralized browns, it goes in and almost looks like red or rust, but this is brown. This is the generic brown for, the label says brown. And then I'm dipping that brown into some of the bone color to get the highlight. It's giving me like almost fleshy, peachy, but not too orange. You know what I mean? Kind of looks like a light flesh almost. And that's giving me the highlight. Little of the darks, and again I was very sweepy in there when I did them, so I'm not annihilating the skin by doing multiple passes, but you've really got to skim, and it's, the thing is, you say, oh man, well, if you skim, isn't it going to look like crap when it heals up? No, because it's not one skim. You're talking, 5 skims is full saturation. You're not putting it in less of a depth. You're just putting in less density. So I'm not putting in the needles more shallow than I would normally tattoo. I'm just kind of moving faster so that I'm putting less punctures per inch. That was like science. Punctures per inch. Less PPI. That was my guy that likes ointment voice again. So let's just set the record straight. All right. In with the darks. It's time to start working out the darkness around the mouth. A little ointment. That's another thing I find myself lately, not so much working from bottom to top, but working from right to left. I still start at the bottom, but it's like I kind of go from the bottom to the top on the right, and then move to the left. I don't know. I've noticed that lately, though, about myself, without even thinking about it. I've kind of adapted this more almost like finishing the right side of things and then bringing my hand across. It's all the same, really. It's all stencil preservation. It's how do you feel you're gonna wipe off the stencil the least and get the most tattooing done in the process. You know, basically what I'm saying is, how much can you bring to completion in an area or areas without wiping off the stencil? So I'm finding that I start at the bottom right as usual, but I don't so much go bottom right to bottom left, middle right to middle left, like that side to side typewriter, reverse typewriter kind of technique. Lately, it's been more like, you see how I kind of have almost the whole right side fleshed out? I'm doing that. I'm kind of going from top to bottom on the right and moving my hand now across to the next section. And it makes sense because if you look where my hand is resting now, it's resting over the stuff that's all done. So if I would have done this earlier, let's say before I did the cheek and the eye, let's say if I just did the bottom neck and the bottom muzzle, I'd be wiping off the cheek and the eye with my last three fingers of my right hand. I'd be knocking the stencil back quite a bit. So this works for me. So it's, you know, stencil preservation. If you're lefty, everything is reversed. There's brown in that black. You could see it. I mean, if you look close enough, you could see it. There's the brown. It's pretty obvious. The only places I'm putting in black as black would probably be the nostrils, the bottom edge of the upper lip, the pupils, and the outer details of the eye. Anything else that's black in this tattoo is black dipped into something else, without a doubt, or something else dipped into black. All right, so I was looking at the photo just now. I was like, man, you know, I got myself in the warm frame of mind here, and I'm putting too many warms in this shadow, so I just put a little bit of a gray to knock that warm back. But again, I can't go nuts because I've already saturated, so I just put a quick pass of a little bit of a grayish tone. And if you look, it's that spot back up on the lip there, those two little kind of negative spaces that were kind of a reddish brown that I later hit with the gray. It's the only thing bleeding, and that's what I was trying to say earlier. That just goes to show you what you can and can't do. Now that area healed, thank God, perfectly, but if I would have done more than just a couple of quick brushings with the gray into the fully saturated brown, definitely would have had a healing problem. But this tattoo, thankfully, healed up really, really good. Excellent. You know, I have the luxury of seeing my wife's tattoos go through the whole process. So this was a great heal. And I love this injector machine, man. I really do. I love the Hawk machines as well, the Spirit and the Thunder. I have them both. I use them both for different purposes. I'm finding that the Flight for me is kind of an all-purpose machine. I'm able to line, shade, color, black and gray. It doesn't matter. And as far as lining, like having to do a traditional line, it's my favorite. There's something about the spring bars that give me that little bit of mush, that little bit of pushback that I used to like about coil lining. It helps, prevent you from blowing lines out. Rotaries are very easy to blow a line out. because they don't back off. You know, a rotary is going to give you the full penetration, depending on the way it's machined, the cam, and the the length of travel of the bar and so on. Anyway, I'm not trying to get in and go off on a whole sidebar about rotary machines, but like if the machine says it's a 4mm machine or a 3.5mm machine, that means it's got to travel that distance. There is no gray area. But that's not to say you can't set a 4mm machine and only have a millimeter of needle coming out. That doesn't mean it's going to force the needle to come out 4mm. It's only going to come out 1mm. But in the case of the Flight 2, they've got this ingenious spring bar and 3 degrees of tension. And I hate to call it tension because it's not even tension. It's 3 degrees of springiness. The springs are just different stiffnesses. I thought originally I was tattooing with, they also sent me a rigid bar, which makes it perform very much, if not identically, to a Hawk or any direct drive rotary, thinking that would be my favorite, and I used it for quite a while. Then I did some coil tattooing, some black and gray pieces with some really soft hitting coils, because I still do tattoo with coils, and I primarily use Keith B machines are my primary coil, and I also had a machine built by Kevin Riley. I had the essentially the same J-frame that Bob Tyrrell uses, built by Kevin, and did some tattoos with it at a very low voltage, very much like I had heard Bob recommend in his seminars, and loved it. Had a lot of fun with it. I like to use bigger mags, but I forced myself to use a small mag and really put myself in that headspace of how Bob Tyrrell does a black and gray piece. So anyway, make a long story longer, I liked the forgiveness of the coil backing off, and noticed that there were techniques that I could accomplish that way, that I could get the same look of with a rotary, but it didn't feel the same while I was doing it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably doing a horrible job of explaining this, but there's a certain feel to a soft-hitting black and gray shading machine, a machine that's specifically designed for that. And it really gives you a lot of feedback to your hand, what I like to call secondary vibration, which is key in learning to tattoo. That's why I think one of the disadvantages of people jumping right into rotaries when they start is that they never really get a hold of that whole secondary sympathetic vibration theory about what you're feeling come back to your hand off the person, because that's really, it got so much information in it about whether or not you're applying the tattoo properly. But anyway, so I said, well, let me take the Flight. I'm going to put the softest spring they put in there. So I put in the soft spring, and I started running it at a pretty low recommendation, which was about 9.5 volts. I have a critical power unit right now, which I really enjoy. And I tattooed with the Flight. And I was like, oh man, I was able to do a lot of the coil-like motions and effects with that soft spring and the rotary at 9.5, which is crazy because my common setup with the Hawk Spirit or Thunder would be I'm sorry, I'm talking and looking because I don't want to miss anything. I'm essentially doing what I did on the other side, mapping in with a washed out brown with a washed out black, what's going to have hard edges around the face and eyes. So Yeah, so the soft spring and the 9.5 volts, as opposed to a rigid bar and close to between 11 and 12 volts with the Hawk machines. And that's what I'm doing here. This is, if I'm not mistaken, this is at like 9.5 volts with the soft spring. And I'm getting everything I want from the machine. And the other great thing about the soft spring and this machine, and the fact that it's such an awesome hybrid of the feeling of a rotary and the feeling of a coil, is that I'm able to hang more needle with this machine, even though it's a rotary, because of the forgiveness of the mushy spring. And when I tattooed primarily with coils, that's how I tattooed. I hung a lot of needle, had a medium to soft hitting setup usually, at a medium to slow speed. I really never ran hot, heavy machines in my tattoo career because I wasn't able to tattoo that fast or accomplish what I was trying to pull off with that setup. I mean, I've seen people tattoo with that kind of a setup and do beautiful work, but I'm not one of them. It's just not a tool set that works for me. So anyway, I can't say enough about how much I'm enjoying the Flight 2, and I primarily use it right now, and the both Hawk models, and just to revisit coils. I can't recommend anyone more highly than Keith B for coil machines. And I've only had experience with this specifically built for black and gray J-frame shader, but Kevin Riley's machine is outstanding, and I love tattooing with it. So thank you, Kevin, for building that machine. I'm doing some fun tattoos with it, and I love the machine. So here we are. This is probably I want to say this is the lining black, not the power or super black or triple black, pardon me, because when I'm working slow too, and sculpting up an area, I tend not to go right for that triple black, for the same reasons I wouldn't really line with it, because I don't want to over pigment an area with it, because I know it's got a tendency to migrate more. So I'm just, doing my dust coats, looking at the picture. Where do I want my darkest darks? Leave room for my highlights. And essentially doing a little sculpting. She's got kind of a mole shape under her nostril on this side. That's still in the kind of black family of flesh that occupies her nose, and the center of her muzzle. There's that kind of blackened flesh. But this is another key landmark in my dog's face. So, that's another thing I would say about whether it's people or animals or birds or cats or dogs. You got to put in those key landmarks, those things that make that animal specific. I mean, I could have found a generic photo of a cream-colored French bulldog. I mean, a cream-colored French bulldog female photo would not be difficult to find. If you Googled it, I'm sure you'd find 100,000 of these photos. But the thing that makes it my dog are these landmarks, like this bump she's got under her nose. The certain way her eyes are inset, and yep, there she is. So you can see the one on the right side of her nose actually is bigger and bulgier than the flesh mound underneath our left side of her nose. That right one is more prominent. And always with dogs, especially French bulldogs, it's funny, they all have this as far as I've seen, that specular reflective light right on the tip of the lip, like right where the lips split in the center. On the bottom lip, they all have that shiny spot peeking out. So you got to leave that little negative space so that you could pop some white in there later, so you could really get that nice wet specular highlight on the bottom lip. It's all the same colors, guys. I mean, black, then black with brown. You know, then that same black and brown, and then I'll either add the reddish brown where I need warmth, or I'll add the grayish tan where I want to keep it kind of cool. It's all the same. Every spot of this tattoo is usually using one of those 3 or 4 color ranges, those bands. And this is a great opportunity to point out on the photo paper on the left. If you look, you see those bands. I sampled the bands from the photo. So if you look next to her, okay, let's look up at the photo reference up by the ears. Between the ears, you'll see a scale. At the top, it's kind of a reddish pink, and then you'll see there's a bit of a tan, and then tan with a little bit of the bone color added to it, and then that same color with a little bit of probably white and yellow ochre because it gets a little warmer. So those 4 colors make up that ear, okay? And then the 5th color there is... it's kind of a tweener between the pink and the tan. That one is the rim of the inner ear. I pulled that color from. So those 5 colors will give you the whole of most of both ears, with a little bit of an exception. The ear closer to us goes a little bit darker and a little bit bluer. But you could see that, I'm sure. Then if you look down at the bottom, my hand's obscuring a little of it, but if you look at the bottom edge of that same piece of paper that she's printed on, you see like kind of a gray, and then a grayed out brown, and then a brown, and then a gray, and then kind of a grayed out, almost a grayed out pink. It's almost pinky, purpley gray. Is mauve the right word? I don't know. I don't work at Lowe's, but those are the colors that go across the bottom of the face. So I pull these strings, we'll call them strings of color and value, right from the photo and try and lay them out on the photo paper. I use them to pick the inks. Which there are far less inks, as you saw, than there are dots, because a lot of them are repetitive. A lot of the color strings have similar colors, with few exceptions, to be honest. And usually the exceptions are where they either go extremely darker, extremely lighter, extremely warmer, or extremely cooler. Otherwise, the majority of this tattoo is done with the neutrals that fall in the middle. I hope that makes sense to you guys. Okay, again, a warm passage happens in the photo here at the top of the nose into the central brow, or what would be, the bridge of the nose on a person, I guess. So just brushing. See how it's like I didn't put a lot in there, just a little implication of the warm color. And then look at the picture, look at the tattoo. Is this really what I want here? Because I could still push it one way or the other as long as there's still some skin. And then I decide, okay, I want to go a little more intense near the center, because that's kind of where it gains intensity, because it's kind of a like a cleft, I guess, like a divot. And then feathering away, leaving that edge. If you notice, the tip of the machine is at a little bit of an angle where the part nearest the center of the nose is touching down, and then I'm tilting it up at, less than a 45-degree angle, maybe a 30-degree angle, so that when I rock the machine, you're getting more intensity and puncture toward the center, and then you're kind of getting almost whippy dots toward the other side. So you're getting a hard edge and a soft edge, essentially. I don't know why I said that so complicated, but I just wanted to describe that angling of the machine to you. That, with big magnums, that's a great effect that you can achieve, angling the magnum and using one side to get more depth and intensity. Now, if you look in the photo, the shadow there is not as warm as what I did, but that's an artistic choice. I feel like the tattoo needs warmth there. It was a little warm, so I made it a lot more warm. And you'll see when I pull other color into it, where I left the skin, I'll pull that intensity back a little bit. But I want people's eyes to go right in this zone. I'm trying to frame out, visually, I'm trying to frame out that eye, the one that's already done. Because that's really where I want people to look. Because even in the photo, that's pretty much the focal point. Everything, to me, everything moves away from that eye, the way the photo was taken. There you go. Starting to look like something. So you see, I kind of cooled it down. I must have dipped into a little bit of a gray, because it went a little blue, a little bluer. I know you hear me say something like it went a little blue, and you look at your screen and you're like, I don't see blue. It's a little cooler. It's a little bluer. Trust me. These are subtleties in temperature that really you're going to learn more so by painting and experimenting maybe with your computer than you are with tattooing, because these are not the type of lessons you want to learn while you're doing a tattoo. You want them to be lessons you've learned that you can incorporate into manipulating an image while you're tattooing. So definitely a cooler color to push back the intensity of the warm spot. See, it already, it doesn't look as warm anymore right in the middle. It looks cooler. It's weird. It's weird, but it works. Because color, all these things I tell you too about color or this or that, I didn't invent any of them. It's me, parroting things back to you that I've learned in classes or read in books. Color is not just the color, it's the color it's surrounded by. So just always remember that. And there are many, many great color theory books where you'll see very rudimentary examples where they'll have boxes filled with red surrounded by black, then surrounded by white, then surrounded by orange, then surrounded by, let's say, green, which is its complement. When you put a box of red in the middle of a box of green, and you stare at it, it vibrates. That's how intense the contrast is between those two complementary colors. I mean, they will literally vibrate. So color has as much to do with its neighboring color as it does on its own, and that's a lesson to definitely be taken away from this DVD. I'm looking at that mass now, the dark mass that happens under the nose. And again, look at the wispiness, just the kind of side to side, just keeping it soft on both ends and deciding just on the shape right now, like the placement. of what I want it to be and where I want it to be. And then I'll be more concerned with the color later on. So you see me now rocking side to side with the machine. Very brushy. And you can see in there it's kind of a blue-gray. Really what it is it's black and it's brown. And it's probably a little bit of opaque gray. Oh, yeah, definitely, because look, a little blob of opaque gray just showed its face. Right at the right time, because it made a nice smoky edge. That's one of those Bob Rosses right there. Happy accident. Yep, that's definitely what's going on. You can see I'm dipping into the black. What I would guess is like the medium brown or the brownish tan, and a little bit of opaque gray, and then hitting the water cup with a tap just to give me nice flow. And then I'm just using my hand motions to get the fades that I want, to get the soft edges soft. Looking at the photo now, just be sure I don't leave out any bumps or highlights that are going to make for good detail later. Again, I'm not looking at every detail, but I'm like, where are the landmark details? Like, there's that little roll next to that bump. I must have glanced up and noticed that, but I don't want to leave out that little roll. It's a good opportunity for structure and highlight. But I'm not going in and putting in every hair follicle or every hair, you know what I mean? So it's just like, you pick your battles. And I like that my portraits tend to be a little more graphic than realistic. But which is funny because the customers never say, the only thing the customers usually say is, wow, it looks just like her, or it looks so real. And it's funny because in my head I'm thinking, to me it's very graphic. I tried to make it as graphic as I could without turning it into a graphic. But, the most graphic representation of realism I could, because I know that's what's best for tattoos, is to have the graphics and the shapes, because that's what's going to hold up. It's the graphic shapes and contrasts that will live. A lot of the low contrast, special effect-y stuff that looks great the day you get it, it's not there years down the road. So if all of that other stuff disappears, you need this stuff to be there to hold it together.